A solitary fantasy can transform 1 million realities. What is truth, and who decides?
Imagine you're sitting in a classroom and your teacher begins the lesson by writing a simple equation on the blackboard. 1 plus 1 equals 11. Immediately, your mind protests. You've known since childhood that 1 plus 1 equals 2. This is basic math, a universal truth. So, naturally, you raise your hand, expecting to correct the mistake. However, when you point out the error, the teacher, with a confident smile, responds, "For the test, the answer is 11 because that's what the test says it is." This scenario illustrates a deeper, more unsettling concept, one in which the truth is not defined by reality, but by those in power. In this classroom, and by extension, in this fictional society, the answer to 1 plus 1 is 11, not because it reflects objective truth, but because it's dictated by authority. The answer is determined by those who control the system. What's at play here is not a simple mistake, but a deliberate effort to program minds, to manipulate perceptions. This example highlights a fundamental issue with truth and knowledge. They can be shaped by the powers that be. While 1 plus 1 equals 2 is a universally accepted fact, within this classroom, it's irrelevant. The truth becomes whatever the teacher, representing authority, declares it to be. The reality of 1 plus 1 equals 11 is manufactured, not to reflect logic or reason, but to serve a higher agenda. This is a reflection of how society can mold individuals' thinking, conditioning them to accept falsehoods when repeated often enough or framed within a system they trust. The idea of programming someone's mind is not a new one. Historically, those in power have used subtle forms of manipulation to shape public thinking. By constantly reinforcing a particular belief or interpretation of facts, people's perceptions can shift. This is about teaching the slave to think like the master, to accept a reality created by someone else, even when it contradicts logic. The slave in this context represents the common person, manipulated into adopting the worldview imposed by the master, or those in control. If you manage to convince enough people that 1 plus 1 equals 11, this false equation begins to take on a life of its own. It becomes an artificial truth, a system that produces results consistent with the lie. Over time, what was once seen as absurd or incorrect becomes accepted as fact, upheld by the very structure built to sustain it. This fabricated truth influences decisions, policies, and even beliefs, despite being based on a false premise. This classroom scene forces us to ask an essential question: what is truth, and who decides? In a world where the powerful can dictate what is correct, how do we distinguish between truth and manipulation? It's not just about math problems or test answers. It's about recognizing the subtle ways in which control is exercised over thought and how easily the line between truth and deception can blur when we relinquish our critical thinking to authority. The power of perception. How narratives shape history and society. Throughout history, those who control the narrative have controlled the story of human civilization. The victors, the elites, and the powerful have been the ones who wrote history, shaping the perceptions of future generations. In many ways, we live in an artificial world, one that is designed to keep us in a state of complacency, like animals in a cage, running endlessly on a hamster wheel, chasing illusions of success, fulfillment, and meaning. From the food we consume to the jobs we work, the fabric of modern life is often disconnected from nature, yet it is presented to us as the norm. The paradox is that this system doesn't really work in alignment with nature, but it functions in its own way, within its own constraints. Over time, the unnatural becomes the new normal. As a result, what should be obvious, Right and wrong, natural and unnatural, can become distorted from the perspective of the caged animal. Yet this shift in perception doesn't change the underlying truth or natural order. Nature continues to operate as it always has, even as we live in increasingly unnatural circumstances. One of the most important factors to consider in this context is perception. Perception, in its simplest definition, refers to the way we regard, understand, or interpret something. It's a mental impression shaped by experience, culture, and societal influence. The way we perceive the world determines how we interact with it, and this is crucial in understanding how artificial systems can take root in our lives. Take, for example, the figure of George Washington, the first president of the United States. Born on February 22, 1732, Washington led the American colonies in their struggle against Great Britain, the world's most powerful empire at the time. Despite facing a formidable navy and a deadly land army, he prevailed and helped found a new nation. Yet, amid all this, Washington was known to have indulged in vices, including the use of marijuana, a plant that today is demonized by many. The plant itself has not changed since Washington's time, but our perception of it has. This shift in perception is not unique to marijuana. It reflects a broader phenomenon in how we view many aspects of society. Consider modern life: 9-to-5 jobs, social interactions, relationship dynamics, the monetary system. All of these conventions seem increasingly bizarre when viewed from a natural perspective. However, most people today do not operate from a perspective grounded in nature. Instead, they live according to norms shaped by a worldview that has been dominant since the 1500s. I call this worldview the Euro mind. The Euro mind is a mental framework that sees the world as a place of conflict and competition. It thrives on the control of others, prioritizes material progress above all else, and approaches the natural world as something to be conquered and exploited. This mindset has led to the development of systems that are in opposition to the natural world, creating an artificial ecosystem that we now live within. Over centuries, this worldview has grown in influence and has reached a fever pitch in today's society. The Euro mind, I argue, is the root cause of many of the world's problems today. It has led to environmental destruction, social inequality, and a disconnection from our natural selves. When used in the wrong context, as it is currently, it wreaks havoc on society, warping perceptions and creating systems that perpetuate harm. On this channel, I will be exploring this concept in depth through a series of video essays. Together, we will analyze how the Euromind has shaped modern society, the damage it causes, and how we can begin to break free from its grasp. Through this exploration, we will challenge the artificial truths that have been conditioned to accept and reconnect with a more natural and authentic way of living. Ultimately, the question we must ask ourselves is, how can we reclaim our perceptions from the artificial narratives that dominate our world? And how can we start seeing the world for what it truly is, rather than through the distorted lens of the Euromind? By confronting these questions, we can begin to shift our understanding of truth, reality, and what it means to live in harmony with the world around us.